this is big. This is real big. Like I said, there is nothing bigger. You will not hear a message larger in the next 1,000 years than what I'm talking about. There literally is a plan. There's a blueprint. Hello, I'm John Lancaster, and welcome again to this message series entitled The Body, a revolutionary blueprint, in my opinion, for finding purpose, placement, and peace in your life. There are a lot of books, a lot of self-help books out there, a lot of people on public television talking about how you should live your life and ways to find that true meaning of life, to be able to find, true significance. But I've looked into most of them, and I believe that there is some big picture thinking missing, some very large items of the puzzle that are missing. And so about 12 years ago, I mentioned in the introduction last video of how about 12 years ago almost an epiphany hit me as far as what is the plan? Lord, you got to have a plan. You had a plan for macroscience, as we mentioned in the last one. You have a plan for microsciences. You know the stars and you know our cells. And if everything is that incredibly designed by you, then what about these 7 billion people on the earth? Is there no design for mankind? Is there no design for how we're to fit together, Or are we pretty much just similar items eating up space and fighting for the natural resources in a race of sort? And that's probably why we have so many, quote, races. I mean, what a terrible word. What are we racing for? Survival? This didn't make much sense. And so I believe if there was a plan, if we could understand a plan for mankind, a corporate plan, I think we'd get along. I think we'd find there'd be a lot more unity. I think if we could find our part and our piece that was very good for us, not a job, not some kind of, just a career or something. I mean that we literally have a design that we were made for, that, our very DNAs were intricately formed for. We mentioned that your DNA is 48 volumes long. 48 feet long on a shelf. That's pretty intricate. So I just have a hard time believing that much design went into something that is pretty haphazard. If we put that much design, if scientists put that much design into a machine that would cost probably trillions of dollars, I don't think they would do it without a purpose in mind. Simple things like houses and spacecraft compared to the human body are designed for a purpose. And I believe people are designed as well. So in this one, I'm going to be looking at a kind of a sketch, an overall sketch of, just as when, a rendering, just as in building, usually the architects will do kind of a sketch to see, and then they can narrow it into the finer details. So we're going to take a look at, in this one, in section 1 here, the big picture sketch, the big picture framing. What's the framework of what we have here? In our first, in the introduction, we talked about this timeline from Adam and Eve, all the way till now, okay? This is today. And then here along is Jesus, and here along was Abraham, and we had mentioned the pulse of history, of how it would just be these pulses. How something is about to happen. It just looks right. It's even in the 1,000-year marks. These were all dark periods of time. But you see this rest period in music. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. We're in the ti time. We're about to enter into something that's pretty amazing. And so, but I believe right here that there's a part in Jesus' life that there's a lot of contention over. It's a major contention in the Christian faith, especially amongst Catholics and Protestants. And that was this last night, the last night that Jesus was alive, okay? When he was alive, okay, right here, there was this meal he had with his disciples. And it was his last night on earth, and he knew it. He knew it was his last night. He knew he was going to be gone tomorrow. And so if it was your last night, that's an important time. So he summoned them together, and he said, guys, I got something important to say. And he did, and he said some new things he hadn't said and done before. And we're going to take a look at those three things, because I believe those three things are a key to where we went off base here. You know, before this, the life that God had intended for all of us was an amazing life. You know, if in building, when we try to track down a problem, we go back to where test all it from foundation back, and just go, okay, where is it? There's a crack in the sheetrock. Well, there's something wrong with the framing. Well, it could be the foundation. Well, it could be the dirt underneath. So go back to the very beginning and see where it went wrong. Well, we were designed to live forever. It was the kingdom of God on earth. And it was a wonderful time. And it wasn't something that was supposed to be a temporal thing. It was something that he said, go and multiply. And we are so far from that experience right now. The earth has gotten pretty dark. And so, but if you look at what happened, where was that first veer? Right at that moment. Where's that first veer? And what happened? And what were the thoughts that led to that? And so, when they began, and it's now heading downhill now, right here, one of the first three things they did that night, that morning in the garden was, and it's the first thing that I want to address that Jesus talked about. The first thing they did was they declared independence. Now, they were no longer wanted to be interdependent. They said, hey, I think we've got it now. And they chose independence. They chose to be disassembled, as it were, from their father. And so he had to go looking for him. Where are you? Where are you? What's going on? It seemed good to do that. Well, Jesus, on the night that he was, the night before he was going to the cross, one of the first things he did that night was he took a loaf of bread, and I'm going to draw a loaf of bread, and he broke it. And I believe he was trying to give us a blueprint on how to get restored back to here. One of the first things that we did wrong. He was trying to show us how to get back so that we don't have this roller coaster anymore. And so, in doing so, he took a loaf of bread and he broke it into pieces. And I think we've misunderstood that for years. I think we've miscalculated just how deep and how awesome that was. And I don't believe the Catholics or the Protestants have it right yet. I don't think it's transubstantiation, and I don't think it's just some kind of remember me thing. It's something a lot bigger than that, and that's what I want to get into here. So keep that in mind, because I'm going to go to a very practical time, but I'm going to come back to this. So how this began for me, practically and personally, is I've been in business all my life. I think I mentioned that. And when you have your own business, you have the arduous task of hiring and having to let people go, and that's a very costly mistake. It's one of the first things you learn that, wow, you can make mistakes on other things, but if you make a mistake on hiring, oh goodness, that'll cost you. That's probably the largest one you can make, except getting in the wrong business. Having the wrong type of employee or misfitting employees. The Bible says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. Well, I think it's also true for people. I think it's possible to find a job that you won't have to depart from, that you can be trained up in, and you won't leave. But if you don't find that, you'll always be looking out the window. You'll always be looking for another job. You'll be saying, this is unfulfilling. And so I believe that our career guidance counselors and our educational systems need to change our whole way of thinking. We don't need to be treating people as a blank slate and fill them with something, a career that might pay well, or something that you think you want. I think we need to look and examine people individually and find out what their natural skill sets are, because they do have natural skill sets. And I found this kind of the hard way. I found it through Hard Knocks College. I would hire people because I liked them, or because they came referred, or their resume looked really well. And soon I found out that that was a monster mistake. I had to find another way. And eventually over time I got a little wise to it, and I began to see that there were people, say in the area of sales, there were people who had a natural talent for it. There were people who just, they were selling all their life. They got you excited about things that you normally wouldn't be excited about. It's something that can't be taught. I would call it intrinsic. They would just know. They would just know what a person's feeling and their concerns and fears. You just have to teach them some of the product. But the biggest thing was the interpersonal relationship. If they knew the product, boy, they were awesome. I could teach them the product, but I couldn't teach them the DNA of sales. So I began to look for two things in people. I began to look for character, and I called it DNA, or talent. Way before we had these talent competitions, just as in these talent competitions, they don't ask, let me see your resume or anything like that. They say, like for the singing competition, sing. Well, I would say, okay, let's talk, or what have you done before, or let me see those type of results. And there were natural abilities in the area of sales. There was a natural ability in production management. There were people I had hired that had 6-year college degrees, a master's in production management, and they were terrible. They couldn't do it. They had the brain sense. They had the pieces of paper, but they couldn't do it. They would go to a job and they would almost be blind to it. But then I had one guy who had like a 6th grade education, and he was awesome. The jobs went fluently. He could pick a problem and see it before it happened, and people loved him. He had the DNA. In areas of accounting and all that type of thing, there were naturally organized people I began to see. Now, you could tell by the way they dressed, that your books were going to look like the way you could look in their car, look through the window of their car and see how their car was. You'd get an idea. And so I began to see this DNA thing, especially in the area of the workers. I called them the athletes of the company. You had to scout for them like athletes had to scout. As coaches have to scout nowadays for the different sports. And so I began to see, well, wait, and there's also a major difference even amongst the type of work. And in my business, there was there's 2 types of carpenters. There are framers and there are trim carpenters. And though they're called carpenters, they're very different. And don't get the 2 mixed up. If you've got a framer putting up trim, you're going to use 10 gallons of caulk to fix it. And if you've got a trim man framing up your house, well, you just went out of business. It's going to take forever. It'll be done perfectly, but it'll bankrupt you. And so I began to see these things, and I went, gosh, this is such a hit and miss thing. Is there a test or something? Or am I alone in this? And I began to see that there were these things called personality tests. And so in studying personalities, it revolutionized my business. And fast forwarding over the next 10 to 20 years, my profits and efficiency of the company just skyrocketed. I mean, we started doing more with less every year. It was a very exciting thing to discover. And I was like, more people need to know this. Because when I would find somebody who had a natural talent for it, there was very little job changeover. We didn't have much turnover. People stayed. And I made sure, I actually studied to be a missionary. I treated it like, that the business itself was a ministry in itself. And so I didn't, nickel dime people. And they stayed, and they stayed. And they went, wow, this is neat. And I valued the person for what they were. And so, but I began to study these different types of personality tests, and there's a lot of them out on the market. You've probably taken a few. But the problem with a lot of them, I began to find out, was they would ask you what you thought. There wasn't like a neutral set of eyes looking in. And they would just pretty much take your feelings. And then when they would take your answers, how do you know? You're just speaking from, your limited view. You really need somebody to give you some kind of, direction or guidance into that. And so there was one type of personality test that I really liked, and you might have heard about it, and it was called the DISC method. Now, it's got nothing to do with discs, but it's these 4 letters, and they stand for something. And I liked it because it had a basic belief system that your personality was a mixture of these. Like you could be high in one and then medium in another and next to nothing in another. And this graph was your personality. And I understood that because I understood colors, and you might as well, that there were 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And then with a brightness of black or white, you could get, with just these 4 areas, any color in the color wheel. In fact, your computers and your TV screens are just little pixels, and they have a mixture of that. Actually, it's red, green, and yellow, but it's and blue. It's just the mixture of that can produce any color in the color wheel. It can produce 7 billion personalities. And so what I'm going to do is kind of give you a helicopter flyover vision of this, of what I saw, and then where it led to. And we're going to get back to what we talked about in the beginning. So, if there's 4 things, let's say your brain is divided into 2 halves. And you've heard about left brain people and right brain people. Well, there's a lot of science to that, and there's a lot of truth to that. So let's say the left brain is objective. And that's people who are familiar with numbers and shapes, and they're the objects of life, the things, and the spatial design, and they just know how things mechanically work. They know how numbers work. And over here, let's call this the subjective side. So this is objective, and this is the subjective side. Now, subjective people are more in tune with feelings, emotions, the people, the subject of a sentence. They're better at poetry, and they're better at comedy. They understand things that make you laugh and cry. And so this is a very general overview that I'm giving, but in essence, there is those type of hemispheres. But the brain or the psyche is also divided this way as well. And it's divided amongst, say, the more aggressive or the more extrovert and the more passive or the introvert. And it's more of some people are more comfortable being the hammer. Some people are just more comfortable in being the nail. And so there's a basic sort of a little more confidence in moving forward. And here is a little more reserved and want to get it correct. So there is no good or bad personality. But what's neat is when you have objective side, subjective side, and aggressive and passive, when you overlay that, you end up with 4 quadrants, and that's what they came up with. And so this first one they called D. Now Don't worry about the letter, but it stands for choleric, and it means that people with this as one of their major points are more comfortable with the objective side of life, and they're more comfortable in leading. So when you put that together, you see that these type of people make pretty good generals. They make good CEOs. They make good leaders, Navy SEALs. They make good missionaries. They just make good leaders overall in objective areas of life. And so, but on the same aggressive side, there's the aggressive subjective, which means this person is very comfortable in moving people. They're the talkers, the communicators. They're the people who tend to light up a room when they come in, and the party can start. But they're also the ones that sometimes just don't stop talking, and it's because it's not work for them. It's not work for them to talk to people. They've never met a stranger, and I'm sure you know people like that. And they call this the I, or the sanguine. And sanguine means hot-blooded or red-blooded. And so, but let's just stick to these letters here. This third category is a passive subjective person. Now, what is a passive subjective person? Well, they're the ones that everybody loves. They're the ones that they wear well. They wear well with almost any group of people. They have very few enemies, and they're very patient, and they're very loyal, and they don't complain much, and they are the actual. You find this is the number one characteristic of athletes and workers, those who do. These are the doers of life. They're the ones that Nike made billions of dollars with the Just Do It campaign, because they understand athletes, that's what they believe. And so when you tap into those they're the ones who get stuff done. They're the ones who say, lead, follow, get out of the way, let's do something. And so, but that's a very, very important group of people. And finally, this last group are passive objective. They understand things. They understand numbers and things, but they want to get it right. They're more, let's find out. They're not going to plow ahead. They're going to research and check everything 3, 4, 10 times. And we call that the C. And they are the thinkers. They make, school is very easy for them. Memorizing stuff is very easy for them. And they are the ones that you give that complicated task to. They are the ones who have to memorize 8, 10 years of schooling for something. And it sticks, versus these people, maybe not so much. But they understand details and they memorize it. They're the ones who can do the Rubik's Cube with their eyes closed, or memorize, 30 decks of cards. And so, but they can also memorize all the things necessary to become a doctor, or any of the complicated sciences. And so, but as I saw this, I saw, well, that's kind of neat. And so over the years, I began to if I wanted accounting, got me a high C guy. If I needed somebody to see a job or oversee it, that's where the word comes, oversee, I thought this guy, because he understands it. And if I needed somebody for sales, well, you guessed it, right here. And then if I needed the workers, I wanted to make sure they had a natural ability. They weren't the type of people that would fall off a roof. I learned the hard way on that. There are people who are naturally kinesthetic. That's the kinesthetic people. They're coordinated. They learn things real quickly physically. And so I began to, over the years, not call it R, G, and B and stuff like that, but I started just saying, I need some eyes on the job to oversee. So I would call that eyes, And here I would call the mouth. I said, give me any of these, if I need some communication done, if I needed somebody to go deliver a message to a customer or to a group of people, I would make sure I had somebody who had a strong showing in that department in the mouth area. And I said, well, give me a mouth. I need a mouth for this. In the S, I say, give me a doer. Give me a doer, And again, each one of these have a mixture. You're not all in one, but you have one strong one and then and usually a second or third backup. And then if I needed something orderly or something that required a lot of thinking or complicatedness, I said, oh, I need a brain on this one. And we do that in school. That he's a brain. Wish that mouth would be quiet. This guy can't sit still. And this guy's ADD. He's just overseeing. And so as it began to make a lot of difference in my company, I began to teach it a little bit and did further research. And in doing so, I found out it wasn't actually a quadrant like this. It was quite a bit different. It was actually, the percentages were quite a bit different than that. In fact, the D was not 25% of the population. They did surveys of how you came out in these tests, and they found that in the United States, which is a pretty good representative of the world, they found that as far as D's, there was only, surprisingly, about 2 to 3%. And as far as I's, there were only 12 to 13%. And as far as C's, there was only 10 to 11%. And so, actually, this is a lot smaller here, like this. And so, in essence, when you looked at that, this group of people only instituted about 25% of the population. And so if you look at it over here, if you took the I's, okay, let's say I's, okay, they were 2 to 3%. And then if you took the communicators, the mouths and ears, they listen and they say, so I'll draw that. I'm not an artist at all, so but let's just draw the ears and nose and mouth. And actually those people are very sensitive to those areas of life as well. They're very sensitive to sound and to people's speech and to sense of smell and stuff. So, and so I saw that, and then when you got the brain, at 10 to 11%, you began to see that this group of people right here was 25% of the population. And this group, the S, comprised the largest section, 75%. And I'll kind of represent them as the rest of the body, okay? So, these were 75%. And, but also, I had studied a little bit in college about sports medicine, and I also knew that amongst the natural body, there were natural gifts and talents in the area of, say, in sports, where you have sprinters and distance people. And the sprinters had more fast-twitch muscle systems, and the endurance people had more slow-twitch muscle systems. And there were differences amongst a person's natural makeup. And you can see it. You can see it in sports very well. And I also began to realize that this has a lot of division. There are a lot of people that love to do repetitious things, very repetitious. There are other people like to do. They're just naturally gifted. They're freshmen in high school and they can bench press 400 pounds. That's crazy. They hadn't lifted weights in their life. They just are naturally strong. And there are those who are just naturally nimble and intricate in what they do. And putting their fingers on keys on a keyboard or strings on a violin came very easy to them, and others it didn't. And so there are very, very different kinesthetic gifts as well. But as a whole, 75%. So, and then over time, I began to look at this, and I go, wow, look at that. Isn't that a coincidence? Looks like a body here. And I knew a little bit about, I'd studied a little bit about, macroeconomics and how different things work together and how, labor, the whole 1 in 3 labor force thing. And I was like, well, there you go. Look at that. It's coming back. You got 25, 75%. I understood the whole division between management. And I realized, these are the management group. These are the white collar people. And these are the blue collar. they like to do. They don't want to be in a stuffy cubicle. They want to be out there doing. They want to be around the people. They don't want to be segregated off. But then I also knew that these people had kind of congregated together. And so, and I knew the difficulties between labor and management. And how this right here was always seemed to be a point of contention of you don't appreciate us. Well, you guys don't understand. These people are going, you don't see, you don't understand. We're trying to tell you. You know, you can tell by what a person says if they go, you don't see, or didn't you know? They're actually expressing naturally what comes sort of easy to them. These people are going, what are you going to do about it? What are we going to do? And so you can see this contention, and I do, and I understand it. I have a big problem with the way most of the money goes up here. I have a big problem. I don't understand why it's not a lot more proportional than it is. And that causes one of the major things. But then there's also a problem I have with these people being blind and not thinking. They tend to cut off the very limb they're sitting on in some of these disputes. And so I saw the blindness and maybe not thinking, and come on, guys, listen. And so you'd be saying these things to them, and they'd be saying things, you don't know what we're feeling. You don't know what that made us feel. And so you can see that these type of union labor versus management decisions can kill. A decapitation can kill, like what recently happened with Hostess. And so, so this really started to intrigue me when I saw this body shape. And this is where we fast forward to about 12 years ago, when I was sleeping one night and I was just struggling with this whole communion thing, and then it hit me. When he took the bread and he broke it, he said, "This is my body. And I give you a piece." He gave out pieces. He didn't hand out mini loaves or muffins. He handed out pieces of a whole. And being in business, I knew if you didn't have these working together, you wouldn't have a successful company. In fact, any endeavor that had these pieces had a successful endeavor. And if you didn't, I have tried to do all things, and I couldn't. Oh, I'd wear out. I'd be doing 90% of my energy on 10% of the stuff because it wasn't natural for me. But I began to see this as, wow. But there were certain things I could do that were natural. And I was more of a D, more vision. It was just easy for me to see things. And I'd be always going, don't you see, don't you see? And eventually I said, I'm a set of eyes here. And it started to make sense. And then, well, when I realized that Jesus said, this is my body, and it's broken up into pieces, and we haven't understood all those years. I didn't understand it as a Catholic boy and didn't understand it after I went to these Bible schools. As what was that about? What was that? Even Martin Luther didn't understand it. He didn't. He nailed his 95 Thesis, and he couldn't really address that. What was he talking about? And then this hit me. It's like, wait a minute. And then some of his sayings would just kind of flow through my brain. Whatever you do to the least of these, you've done unto me. And later on, Paul would say, the eye can't say to the foot, I don't need you. And so we're using all these, quote, metaphors. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. And then all this Bible study started flowing in. And I'm like, it wasn't this disconnected thing from theology. This business, very practical business concept. I was like, whoa. Maybe the blueprint for man, maybe, the secret that everybody's looking for in the different business colleges, maybe the blueprint for man is a man. And maybe we have, just as similar to the parts of your body, have very necessary parts and very similar in their qualities and design. I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? But when I woke up about 12 years ago, it made sense. It started to make sense that, whoa, I am not, until this body comes together, we won't know what Jesus was talking about. And I began to realize, wow, that is so intuitive. That is so intrinsic to our own thinking. That's instinctive. Everybody can understand that. A little kid can understand that. You don't have to teach equality and race relations and things. All you can just say, you can go up to a little kid and say, hey, I got a little knife here. Could you give me one of your fingers? I could just, you've got 10. And they cry. They go, no. All right, give me one of your ears. You got 2 of them. They go, no, I need it all. All right, one of your toes. All right, no, I can't do without even these small parts. A child understands this. And everyone intrinsically understands this. When you look in a mirror into a puddle, you can see something that just makes sense. Maybe the God of the universe didn't make it very complicated at all. Maybe it was very simple. And it is so intrinsic and intuitive to us that just like if you went to somebody's house and they had a lot of building materials laying around. They had a 2x4 laying over here, and they had a kitchen sink laying over here and in their yard, and they had some cabinets over here and some cans of paint. You would say, that's kind of sloppy. Or another friend's house, he's got an engine, over here, and he's got a back seat over here, and he's got, I don't know, steering wheel laying in his driveway. You'd say, that's kind of sloppy. But if you were to walk into another friend's house and he had a hand lying around and he had, a leg on the kitchen counter and he had, some eyeballs in the sink, it would gross you out. There's something about dismembered body parts that make us real uncomfortable, and it's universal. It is, we label that movie R when it has that in there, or X, because it's just more than we can bear. It is so wrong. It is universally understood that that's wrong. That's just not right. And that doesn't even have to be taught. When a part of the body is dismembered, that just ain't right. You got a finger over here and it's cut off. It doesn't look right. It just, put it back, sew it on. So this independence doesn't look right. But it was evidently right to Adam and Eve, and 6,000 years of generations since. Independence is actually looked highly upon. Break away. Get enough money so you can live by yourself. Doesn't make any sense. But if we look at it this way, we start to understand what you're lacking. When you become independent, when you become, say, a prodigal, when you leave, you take your gift, a finger has a gift, you take it and you leave. And it's going to take a lot of money to sustain it. When you're by yourself, you have to purchase everything now. It doesn't come free and easy. And that's why there's so much energy needed. It's so much energy that's needed, and so much money that is needed, and so many resources that are needed to keep these individual body parts. A toe, keep it, it's decapitated. It needs all these things to sustain itself. Let alone just 2 lawnmowers. You need everything, and so it becomes extremely expensive the consumption of natural resources and energy. Why we need so much fossil fuels? Because we're disconnected. We have to purchase everything individually. But if you were a part of something, it's unnecessary. Well, as I began to see this, I said, oh my gosh, look what our great brains thought of back then. And look what Jesus was trying to tell us. He's like, remember me. Jesus came to show us what we look like. He came to show us that like a globe. He's saying, look at me, I'm like a globe, and you are the earth. And I don't believe the disciples understood it. I don't believe we've understood it. And he reached for something on the table, and he went, this is my body, and it's going to be broken up and given to pieces. And he handed out pieces. He handed you a piece and me a piece. And it's why we are so different. We're so different on the inside. He just made us similar looking on the outside. So I think so we could relate to each other and get along. But inside, we're more different than the animals in the animal kingdom. In fact, we treat animals in the animal kingdom or in the zoo with more compassion than we treat humans. We give them different food types. We give them different environments. We don't put the polar bear in the alligator's environment. We don't put the alligator in the polar bear's environment. And we don't expect them to like each other's natural habitats as well. And we don't ask them to have the same type of social interaction needs. But we treat people very communistically, very, very white slate. Throw them in the big yellow school bus and teach them, shove down 7 subjects that we think are important. And if the fish can't climb a tree and the squirrel can't swim very well, they get Fs. We don't do that. We don't do that to animals. But we abuse kids, and we're so used to it. And time has gone by, and we're like frogs in the hot water. We're just so used to it, but it's sucked the life out of us. We're used to getting jobs, jobs, and the only reward is the money, and we can hardly wait to retire, the weekends, or to get drunk in a bar. We want to escape, and if we had enough money, we'd quit. But if you knew your thing that you did that wasn't work, like holding this chalk, it's not work for my fingers, but if I had to put it in my eye and try to draw, it'd be a lot harder. It'd be hard for my toes to do it. It'd be hard for me to walk on my hands for my whole life, but it's not work for my feet. They can carry me. And when you can find something that doesn't feel like work, that's an amazing gift. And I believe there is something for all men. There is a calling, a job description that it's a certain place you belong, certain place, but it has a purpose. And in doing so, it's as much peace as being connected. And then you get to enjoy the rest of the body. You don't have to do that anymore. And this, I believe, when this is understood, we can be in that final time frame where the kingdom of God can come on this earth. Because what is this? This is a restoration of the way it was. Adam and Eve in the beginning, did not see independence from God as something to be looked upon. Jesus didn't either. Jesus just went about doing what he saw his Father doing. It was nothing he wanted to separate there. But we separated from our Heavenly Father, and because of that, we've been on our own, and we've been doing stupid stuff ever since. Independent people, we're eating like the prodigal son, eating hog slop when we should go home. And this is home. In the medical world, they call, when the body's at peace, homeostasis. It's a place of ease and peace that the body is searching for. Homeostasis. And you begin to see that, wow, it's not unity or division. It is unity and division. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you were to start a company and you got 10,000 people in a room and said, guys, we're going to have the best company in the world. We're going to have the best company in the world. We've got accountants and lawyers and salespeople and everything. Now go and let's have the best company in the world. Well, there'd be a lot of division still because there was no unity of vision. Well, what are we going to do? Computers? Cars? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So it takes a big picture in order to bring unity. They say without vision, you'll perish. Well, if you don't know what you're supposed to do, a corporate set of plans, then the individual pieces are just going to bump into each other, and eventually there'll be a lot of animosity and a lot of backstabbing, and much like in our school systems today, a lot of bullying, a lot of putting down and shoving, and I don't know where I belong. I don't know why you're different than me. That's why I push. And that's why I'm defensive. But if you had a vision, much like I think I spoke in the last one of the blind men and the elephant, if you could see the elephant in the middle, so that all the people that had the different parts, and they knew what it was, if you could see the elephant in the room, finally, we talk about seeing the elephant in the room, but if you could see this picture, then it would bring unity to the people instead of division. But also on the flip side is you can say, hey, we're going to start you have 10,000 people in a room, and we're going to start the greatest computer company in the world. And everybody's excited. We're going to beat out Apple and Google. You watch. It's so good. You get them all fired up. And then say, let's go. And before they left the auditorium, they'd be fighting because there was no division of tasks. They're going, well, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this. And then you start getting fights that way. There's no division. It becomes incredible division because nobody gave division. So it takes unity and division to literally have unity. It's my belief why the United States was so successful is because we kept the e pluribus unum. We kept the out of many one. It's on the back of the dollar there. We kept it. We made sure we kept it together, and we kept the different parts. And we were so successful as a country that it was interesting to find out where we were a country of immigrants. But if you study, a little bit of church history, you study Babel, and they separated, and they went different places, and they formulated. And then I began to study, oh my gosh, the countries are that way. Look at this. You've got England. There's this CI company. They're very smart and talking type of country, but maybe they lack a little bit of vision. They lost a war a few hundred years ago, but you began to see this congregation in Europe of types of people. And you got France over here, and they're a little bit different. They were more ICs. They were sanguine thinkers. Probably one of the reasons why today they have about a 3-hour workday. They're not much into the S there. And so, but then you could look at Germany. You got this DC or CD, very left brain, but maybe not a lot of comedy clubs, or not necessarily noted for, hospitality and warmth, though it's one of the most pristine places I understand on there. I've not been there, but then you can look at, say, Sweden. There's this SC Sweden. And you go, oh my goodness, that's right. They're the peacemakers. The S and the C are both on the passive side, but they're very intricate doers. Well, Swiss watches. And the story between them and the Germans was amazing in the war, but that's another story. But then you can look at Africa, the IS Africa. Amazing, colorful, sanguine people and doers. And then you also look at, South America, the amazing SI people there. Some of the best workers in the world, and pleasant and accommodating people, noted for their hospitality. And so you began to see that these people all immigrated, and you ended up with this DISC country, and because of that, it skyrocketed. Oh my goodness, this is exciting. This is exciting. I began to see when the pieces came together, then success started to happen. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, that's pretty amazing. And so we're going to go into this more and more, especially when I get into the final three in section 3. We're going to get into the amazing theological, and in part 2 we're going to get into the educational and geopolitical ramifications of such a concept. All I'm doing right now is giving a sketch, just a sketch of, hey, let's think about this. Let's think, hey, just maybe it's been in front of us all along. Just maybe it's that simple, and we haven't seen it. And so I'm going to close with one final story. There was a man, and he coming home from work, and he was tired, but he had this rambunctious 3-year-old son, and, perhaps the son was a phlegmatic, but he wanted to play, and he wouldn't let Dad alone, and he said, Dad, let's play, and he said, I just need some time, son. I just got home from work. Can you give me a few minutes? Come on, Dad, let's play. And he was like, I got to read this magazine, but he came up with an idea. He saw in the magazine was a picture of the earth, but it showed all the continents and everything. of like a globe. And he said he had an idea. He said, I think I'm going to tear this up. And so he tore it up in a bunch of little pieces, and he gave it to Junior. And he said, put this together. And when you put this together, go ask your mom for some tape. And when you put it together, come back and then we'll play. So he thought he had bought himself some time, but it wasn't just a little while longer later that little Junior came up and he had it all together. It was perfect. And the father was thinking, do I have a genius on my hands? Or did Mama help you? And he said, no, Dad, no. Well, then how did you do it? And he said, well, Dad, I got to tell you a secret. On the other side of that page was a picture of this man, this full page thing of this man. And he said, what I did was I just figured that if I could get the man together, the whole earth would come together. And so with that simple thought, I leave you these simple thoughts. And just maybe that is the secret to world peace. Just maybe if the man would come together, maybe the world would come together. Maybe there's a blueprint after all. And so on the next one, we're going to get into some pretty neat things. In my opinion, each one is even better than the last. So the next one in section 1 here is we're going to be talking about life and what is that. And it's pretty interesting stuff. So thank you very much, and take care.